I want to talk to you a little bit more about the cannabis stocks and looking at that industry. As I said earlier, there's no question that it's going to be a place to make money investing in cannabis stocks. Because, as I said, the government wants to do that because they have pushed cigarettes out, saying how bad they are, and they're going to replace it with something else. And they need tax dollars today. So all governments, because of this COVID, need money, and they need to get their money from things like cannabis. So sad to say, they're going to replace what they crushed, which was cigarettes, and replace it with smoking cannabis. How brilliant is that? But the tax dollar is more important than the health of the people. Even though, in 1980, 84 range, there was a push by the government, started then real strong. Companies picked it up and said you couldn't smoke in the workplace. Before you know it, you couldn't smoke anywhere. Couldn't smoke in the malls, couldn't smoke here or there. The only place you could smoke was outside. And then if you smoked outside in a park area and dropped the cigarette butt on the ground, you were fined for that. They kept squeezing and squeezing and squeezing until people just quit smoking. I was a smoker. I smoked 3 packs a day in 1980. And in 1984, I quit smoking altogether. And because the squeeze was getting too much, the prices were getting too big. And so that's what happened, I'm sure, to a lot of people. They quit smoking. It's also good for me. They were right about that. But what they're saying now, see, the cannabis is good for you because it's good medical. It helps you deal with stress and all that kind of stuff. There's all kinds of cannabis. There's the good cannabis and the bad cannabis. And, if you really look at it, all of a sudden, they're allowing cannabis, the good cannabis, the recreational cannabis also to show up. It's no longer just for medical. And before you know it, it's going to be everywhere. And that's why that industry is going to grow. Again, the biggest problem they're faced today is the government, federal government, has not allowed them to use the banking system. Once that is opened up, that is going to skyrocket. The ones that are hanging on, waiting until that occurs, are out there now. The problem is which one? Well, there's a strategy I talked about earlier about the basket, as well as looking inside the basket and picking one or two to go and invest in. But there's another thing to remember. Remember, I talked to you about pioneers never winning, that eventually they get bought out by somebody else. Well, the second biggest problem that a cannabis company has is how do they reach the market? How do they get a big enough scale? They can't just operate in Dallas or operate in San Francisco or operate in Butte, Montana. They've got to go to grow and to get investors. They got to go into multiple states. Where there are cannabis stocks now that are operating in multiple states, and they on the surface look like they have grown. What's going to happen when the banking system is allowed? All of those multiple state entities will be one entity, and it'll look better and grow better. So that's a candidate. But there's also what I consider a real good candidate. That is people like Scott Miracle-Gro, Constellation Brands. In other words, the tobacco companies in the oil and gas industries stocks are being pushed out because of the new Green New Deal and because of getting away with cigarettes. So what they've got to do is reinvent themselves in order to stay around. So what you find is Scott Miracle-Gro, which has Monsanto and chemicals and people don't like, and it doesn't work with the Green New Deal. What they're doing is that they're investing in cannabis, and they're partnering with a lot of cannabis companies. They become the vehicle for the cannabis stocks to reach a larger market. They reach the market or the customer base of Scott Miracle-Gro. The same thing is true about cannabis stocks that are partnering with ExxonMobil. they're actually doing that. There are cannabis stocks that are partnering with Bud and Coors Light, and all of these entities that are being squeezed by the government. They're partnering with them, and those companies are reinventing themselves and saying, hey, you're telling me like Philip Morris and Mo, you're telling them, hey, you can't sell cigarettes anymore, but so they got to do something. And what they're going to do is that they're going to partner up with cannabis companies, and they're going to market those stocks and reinvent themselves. So one of the strategies is to buy things like Mo, which is Altera, MO, Turning Brands, ExxonMobil, all the large corporations that are going to pick up these companies that need funding and need to reach a bigger market, and those companies are going to be owned by the larger companies. That's how another strategy for investing in cannabis.